You. Fly an F-47? Sweetheart, this isn't a beauty pageant. The instructor laughed, tossed her file onto the pile without even opening it, and moved on to the next name. Zara didn't blink. She didn't speak. She just stood there, quiet, still, holding onto her only pair of worn-out sneakers, now damp from the rain outside. Her face didn't show anger. It didn't have to. Her silence said everything. 3 other applicants sitting nearby chuckled under their breath. One leaned toward her and muttered, "You even know how to start a jet engine, princess?" Zara looked straight ahead, blinking slowly. "Don't react," she told herself. "Not here. Not yet." She picked up her file from the discard pile. It had taken her 3 months to put it together. Her academic scores, simulator tests, flight theory certifications, everything she could gather on her own, with no school, no pilot mentor, and definitely no sponsor. She had passed the entrance exam faster than most of the male cadets. But it didn't matter. The real test wasn't on paper. It was in the looks, the tone, the way they ignored her even when she stood directly in front of them. She wasn't denied because she wasn't capable. She was denied because she didn't belong to them. The officer didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. His smirk already wrote her future for her. As she walked out of the room, Zara clenched her father's letter in her left hand. She didn't need to read it again. She had memorized it years ago, after his sudden death in a maintenance accident at the same airbase that just laughed her out of the room. Beta. Flying isn't just about wings. It's about knowing why you were born with them. Never let them clip yours before you try. She wanted to cry, not because they said no, but because it hurt how easy it was for them to say it. She walked the full mile back to her flat instead of taking the bus. The rain had stopped, but the ground was soaked, her socks wet. She didn't even notice. Her head was down, not in shame, but because she couldn't let anyone see the tears she was swallowing. The front door creaked as she pushed it open. Her younger brother, Rami, looked up from the floor where he was fixing a broken fan motor. "You didn't make it, did you?" he asked, not even looking surprised. Zara shook her head once, quietly. "I told you," he muttered. "They don't give jets to girls like us." She didn't respond. She peeled off her shoes, hung her soaked hoodie, and walked to the small corner table where a disassembled joystick sat, her makeshift flight simulator, made from discarded parts and connected to a glitchy screen. She stared at it, then sat down and powered it on. The fan motor hummed behind her. "You should sleep," Rami said after a while. Zara didn't move. Her eyes locked on the simulation screen. Runway 13L. Wind 14 knots. Clear skies. "I'm going to try again," she whispered. Rami sighed hard. "What part of 'they don't want you'? Don't you understand?" Zara smiled faintly. "All of it." The next few days, she disappeared. Not from home, but from every place people expected to see her. She stopped going to the airbase cafe where she worked weekends, stopped texting her friend Sana. She stopped replying to anything that sounded like comfort. Instead, she turned her world into a mission. She spent mornings rewiring her simulator, days studying complex engine diagrams, evenings stealing minutes from old radio frequencies. At night, when the city slept, she flew alone in her room again and again, executing precision landings in her virtual cockpit. She didn't have training, but she had obsession. No one knew she'd installed a cockpit audio recording from a real F-47 into her headphones, that every button on her simulator, even the fake ones, was matched to a real control sequence, that her bedroom walls were lined with notes, takeoff checklists, and emergency procedures, handwritten in red ink. She trained like her life depended on it, because inside her, something had shifted. A week later, while scrolling through Old Pilot forums on a cracked phone, she found a post buried under dozens of comments. "Open tryout. Civilian applicants welcome." 1 slot for private F-47 demo at South Base Air Show. Proof of skill required, no formal degree necessary. Her heart froze. Eden was a long shot, an impossible shot. But it was something. The entry deadline was 3 days away. She had no money, no access to an F-47, no backing. Just a 5-minute video she'd recorded secretly one night on her simulator, showing her pulling out of a simulated stall at low altitude. She clicked Apply, attached the video, and hit send. Then she sat back in her chair, heart racing, mouth dry. 3 days passed. No reply. On the 4th day, she got a single email. Subject: Approved, Zara Qureshi. Your application has been reviewed. Your simulation caught our attention. 1 test flight. 1 shot. Be at South Base. Friday, 0700 hours. Aircraft, F-47. Wild Strike. You've been cleared. CMDR Rivera, flight evaluation. Lead Zara gasped so loudly Rami dropped the glass he was holding. It shattered on the floor. You okay? He asked. She turned, her hands shaking. I got it, she whispered. What? I'm flying. He stared at her, blinking. What do you mean you're flying? Where? She held up the email with both hands. I mean, I'm going to show them what I can do. For real. He didn't speak, not for a long time. Finally, he said quietly, Don't crash. Zara smiled through her tears. I don't crash. I rise. You're wasting time, Zara. No woman from this neighborhood gets near a cockpit. Just be realistic. Rami didn't say it to hurt her. He said it because he'd already given up on things years ago. Dreams were a luxury for people with bank accounts and last names that meant something. Zara didn't argue. She just nodded, paused the F-47 tutorial she was watching, and quietly closed her laptop. She understood. He wasn't wrong. People from their street didn't end up in fighter jets. They ended up fixing fans, delivering gas cylinders, or, if lucky, becoming junior technicians at airports where they'd never step foot in the cockpit. Their mother had died when they were 10. Their father, a brilliant Air Force mechanic, died without ever seeing the inside of a jet engine he built. So, yes, Rami wasn't wrong, but neither was she. Zara waited until he left for work that evening. Then she reopened the video. The screen was grainy and the sound cracked every few seconds. But to her, it was perfect. The pilot's voice in the black box audio was calm, surgical, even as alarms blared in the cockpit. One engine was dead. Hydraulics were shot, and the F-47 was falling fast. But he still narrated every move. Turning off fuel pump 3, switching to manual override, banking left to use wind, landing gear locked. Zara didn't blink. She mouthed the words with him, again and again, until they became part of her reflexes. She had listened to this same clip at least 400 times. She knew the exact second the pilot cursed under his breath and the precise pitch of the stall warning alarm. She could even mimic the tone of his breathing. Not because she was obsessed, because she was preparing for the moment no one thought would come. Every day at 5 a.m., before the city began groaning with noise, Zara went to the scrapyard near the old runway. It was unofficial. No clearance, no permission. But the guard knew her and looked the other way. She wasn't stealing, just collecting discarded wires, rusted panels, broken throttle handles. She rebuilt her simulator piece by piece. One switch at a time. One dial per week. There were moments when she wanted to give up, like the time she cut her palm open while soldering a circuit board, and it bled for hours. Or when the USB connector burned her laptop's port and nearly wiped her. Flight files. Or when the old man at the radio shop laughed and said, "Beta, these headsets haven't worked since 1996, but every time she wanted to quit, she remembered the way they laughed at her at that interview. like she was a little girl asking to borrow a fighter jet for a joyride. That memory alone lit a fire under her ribs. She took up work at a private jet service hangar near South Base. Not as staff, as cleaning crew. Nobody paid attention to the cleaning girl, which meant she could watch. Every pilot, every pre-flight check, every instruction the crew gave. She learned without asking, memorized without notes. At night, she scribbled emergency checklists on the back of napkins. On break, she timed the fuel reloads and wrote the intervals down in a crumpled notebook. She wasn't just studying flying, she was learning the language of the sky. One afternoon, she was wiping down the side of a private Gulfstream when she heard a mechanic yelling in frustration. The diagnostic screen on the aircraft was glitching, refusing to sync. "Stupid, outdated interface," the man muttered. "I need to reroute the onboard systems, but it's not reading the update file." Zara watched for a second, then quietly said, "The port's legacy protocol. Try changing the file format to FAT32. The system can't read exFAT. It's too modern for this model." The man paused, stunned. "What?" she repeated herself, voice calm. He stared at her, then tried. The screen blinked, then synced. He turned. "Where did you learn that?" She wiped her hands on a rag. "Online." He nodded, almost respectfully. Then, without another word, walked off. She didn't smile, but her heart did. The tryout date was closing in. Zara didn't tell anyone, not even Rami. She kept training, silently, ferociously. By now, her simulator felt like part of her body. She could fly with her eyes closed, just listening to the wind direction readings and instrument alerts. She tested herself. What if Engine 2 failed? What if cabin pressure dropped? What if a bird strike hit the left wing? She practiced every possible scenario, until it became instinct. And then, the email came. "Your video caught our attention. One test flight, one shot." Her chest tightened. It wasn't just a chance. It was the chance. She spent the next 48 hours preparing like she was going to war. Her suit was borrowed. Too loose. She stitched it herself with help from the old seamstress across the hall. She used black shoe polish to fix the scuff marks. Her gloves were second-hand, slightly ripped between the fingers but still gripped well. The night before the flight, Rami caught her cleaning her headset with a toothbrush. He frowned. "Why are you doing this?" She didn't look up. "Because no one else will." He sat down, quiet. "You really think you can pull this off?" he asked, voice not sarcastic, but scared. Zara paused, then looked him in the eyes. "I don't think," she said. "I know." At dawn, she stood at the gate of South Base. Guards stared at her ID, then her face. "You're the civilian applicant?" he asked, confused. "Yes." He radioed someone. They confirmed. He stepped aside. As she walked onto the runway, Zara felt the rumble of a jet lifting off nearby. The heat from the exhaust. The power. The truth. This is where she belonged. Not because someone let her in, but because she fought her way here. Her test aircraft stood waiting, an F-47 Wild Strike. Sleek, intimidating, powerful. Zara stared at it for a long moment, then, with her borrowed suit, her stitched gloves, and her makeshift training in her veins, she climbed in. Every control felt natural, every switch familiar. The ground control officer leaned in. "You ready?" Zara looked at him through the visor. "I've been ready for years," she said. As the canopy closed over her, the sky opened above. "Who's flying that F-47? "No name on the roster, sir. Just says, independent civilian applicant, call sign Z Alpha." The airbase went still. Zara's F-47 didn't just take off. It broke gravity like it had been waiting for this girl its entire life. The aircraft roared into the sky, a streak of matte black slicing the clouds. Inside the control tower, heads turned. Monitors zoomed. The test pilots watching from the ground leaned forward, confused, then stunned. She wasn't flying for elegance. She was flying like the sky belonged to her. Back in the hangar, Rami stood among the mechanics, staring at the sky like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Wait," he said, breath caught in his throat. "That's Zara." The pilot beside him nodded slowly. "That F-47's moving like it's dancing. You don't fly like that unless the cockpit is your second skin," Rami whispered, almost to himself. "She built her own simulator from scrap." The pilot blinked. She what? In the air, Zara tilted the joystick gently, smoothly banking left. Wind speed, 270 knots. Altitude, 8,000. She adjusted thrust, rolled once, then twice, inverted, then dove. The G-force slammed into her chest like a wall of bricks. Her breath tightened, but her hands, steady. This wasn't fear. This was home. The announcer's voice, over the loudspeaker, cracked in disbelief. Pilot Zed Alpha just pulled a triple snap roll at low altitude, followed by an inverted climb that violates standard safety protocol. No prior military record, no documented flight history. In the control booth, the chief of air evaluation leaned forward, eyebrows tight. "Get her telemetry data. I want full control readouts now." Another officer clicked his headset. "Sir, I've never seen that kind of movement on an F-47. Not from any of our cadets, not even the demo pilots." A younger officer, voice barely audible, whispered, "She's not flying by numbers. She's flying by feel." Zara's eyes didn't flick once toward the crowd, or the tower, or the rows of stunned officers. She didn't care who was watching. She had one mission: prove that belonging isn't given. It's earned in silence, sweat, and sky. She initiated a stall, on purpose. Engines slowed, altitude dropped. For a full 3 seconds, the F-47 hovered in dead air, nose angled dangerously, down. Alarms screamed. Then she pushed the throttle, twisted the rudder, and kicked out of it mid-fall. A maneuver that had only been performed successfully twice in public flight history. Down below, silence. Then someone whispered, "Did she just force a stall mid-demo?" A colonel shook his head, stunned. "She just defied every regulation we've written." One of the older women in the crowd gasped, hand over her chest. "She's not flying the aircraft. She's talking to it." Zara's heart was pounding now, not with fear, with fire. Every single second in the air felt like a breath she had waited years to take. Her brain wasn't calculating. It was remembering. Everything she trained in that junkyard, every time she flew blind with a headset duct taped together, every black box she mimicked until the rhythms became hers. Now it was all coming alive, and the world was watching. As she reached her final ascent, a voice broke into her headset. "Z-Alpha, this is Control. You have completed sufficient maneuvers. For demonstration, you may begin landing protocol." Zara didn't reply, not because she couldn't, but because she hadn't finished speaking yet. She tilted her wings and went vertical. Full thrust, climbed past protocol limits. The plane shook. The audience held their breath. She reached the apex. Then, engine steady, she released flares into a spiral pattern and descended in a perfect textbook corkscrew. The crowd gasped, not because it was loud, but because it was silent, precise, clean, surgical, like she wasn't just showing skill, she was rewriting history. As the F-47 touched down with a whisper, its wheels gliding onto the runway, Zara let her hands fall off the controls. They were trembling, but she smiled. For the first time, she knew what her father must have felt like. Not when he built engines, but when he believed one day his daughter might fly them. Rami was already running toward the tarmac as she climbed down. He didn't care about the uniformed officers approaching or the crowd parting. He just reached. Her first, grabbing her by the shoulders. "You..." His voice broke. "Zara, you just..." She pulled off her helmet. Sweat clung to her forehead. Her cheeks were streaked, but her eyes, calm, clear. "I told you," she said quietly. "I was born to fly." The press swarmed. Cameras, recorders, questions shouted like bullets. "Who trained you? How many hours have you logged? Are you from a military background? Where did you study aerodynamics? What's your last name?" Zara didn't answer. She just looked at the chief of evaluation, who had finally stepped forward. He removed. His cap stared at her like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "You have no file, no school, no instructor, no history. Yet you flew like a prototype AI system with 10,000 logged hours." He paused. "How?" Zara met his eyes. "Because I wasn't trained," she said. "I trained myself. When your system said I couldn't." That moment didn't just go viral. It exploded. Within 24 hours, Zara's landing clip was everywhere. The impossible stall maneuver, the zero-bounce touchdown, the spiral flare. Her helmeted face became a symbol. Her silence, her defiance. They didn't have a label for her, so the world gave her one. The ghost pilot. But behind the headlines, something else was happening. She got called to a closed briefing the next day. 7 men, 2 women, all high command. They asked questions she expected. How did you afford simulation training? How did you build a model of the F-47's cockpit without classified specs? Who helped you? She answered with truth and silence, until one commander asked the only question that mattered. Would you do it again? Zara didn't hesitate. Yes, tomorrow, or right now. The man nodded slowly. Then, we'll be seeing you again. Sooner than you think. She walked out of that room with nothing in her hand, but everything in her future. She didn't need applause, or followers, or articles. She needed altitude, airspace, and an open sky. You denied her a slot because she had no military family. Turns out, she's now the benchmark we train against. The boardroom was silent. Screens were paused on still images of Zara's flight, the impossible stall recovery, the zero-error descent, the final spiral flare. A flight commander rewound the footage again, voice shaking slightly. "She didn't just fly that jet," he said. "She flew it like she built it." The general leaned forward. "That's because she kind of did." By the time Zara walked off the runway, helmet tucked under one arm, her name wasn't just trending, it was causing a firestorm. Z Alpha, civilian ghost pilot, the girl who reprogrammed airspace. Soldiers stood back, unsure whether to salute or stare. Reporters screamed questions. But Zara walked past them like she didn't hear a single word, because she didn't need the world to believe her. She'd already made it impossible to ignore her. The Air Force general was waiting for her near the hangars, tall, decorated, stern. But when she reached him, he didn't lecture. He saluted, and then said softly, "Who taught you to fly like that?" Zara's voice didn't shake. "No one. I watched. I listened. I worked twice as hard because you never let me in." His throat worked to swallow the answer. He'd seen arrogance, rebellion, even defiance. But he hadn't expected honesty. That same hour, she was offered 5 pilot contracts, top tier. No academy needed, no written test, just sign. Just wear the uniform they once told her she'd never deserve. But she said no. Not because she was bitter, but because she had already flown past that runway. "Don't want a seat you offer when I scare you," she said. "I want a path that exists before I have to break something to earn it." Back home, Zara didn't celebrate. She sat quietly with her mother in their one-bedroom flat. her boots still dusty, her hands still shaking. Her mother served tea. She said nothing, just stared at her daughter like she was someone both new and familiar. "You were up there longer than I thought," she finally whispered. "I didn't want to come down," Zara admitted, and then they both laughed, the kind of laugh that has tears sitting right behind it. The next day, Zara walked into the old scrapyard where she used to train, alone, in boots she'd patched 10 times. She looked at the rusted plane parts, the fake switchboards, the plastic, throttle built from a broken lawnmower. She stood there quietly, letting the memory of struggle wash over her like wind through broken wings. Then she turned and started making calls. 6 months later, it wasn't called a scrapyard anymore. It was called the Zara Initiative. The sign wasn't fancy, just painted wood. But behind that sign were girls, dozens of them. Brown, black, poor, brilliant. Some couldn't even afford a school uniform, but they came every day. They ran drills, they memorized thrust ratios, they built their own cockpit boards out of trash. And they believed, not because someone told them to, but because someone showed them how. One girl, 13, quiet, came up to her after class. She had never flown a simulator before that week, but now she was pulling G-force turns like a natural. She held up her phone. There was a clip of Zara's F-47 flight playing on loop. "You're not supposed to exist," she said, "but you do, so now I can too." Zara didn't say anything for a second. Then she crouched to the girl's level and said quietly, "Don't fly like me." The girl blinked. "Fly better." Meanwhile, in closed aviation forums and military seminars, Zara's name kept surfacing. The Alpha's recovery maneuver, now dubbed the Silent Twist, became required viewing in every academy. Her improvised, flare pattern became standard emergency procedure. Her solo flight became a case study for adaptive neuroskill acquisition. She wasn't just a symbol. She was a syllabus. One night, a retired flight instructor sat on a podcast. The host asked him, bluntly, "Do you think Zara made it just because she's special? Or because the system failed?" The man took a breath. "She's special, no doubt, but don't confuse rarity with capacity. There are hundreds of Zaras out there. We just never opened the door." Zara never liked speeches, but they kept asking. So, one day, she stood in front of 200 young girls at a public event. No teleprompter, just her patched jacket, her boots, and a quiet smile. She pointed to the screen behind her, a paused image of the F-47 mid-spin. "That's not talent," she said. "That's 1,000 nights without sleep. That's people laughing in my face. That's me flying a simulator with wires tied to a car battery." She paused. "That's what happens when you stop asking for permission." And maybe that was the real story. Zara didn't crash into the sky with rage. She didn't break her way in out of revenge. She simply refused to wait for someone else to believe in her first. Now, every time an F-47 lifts into the air with a woman in the cockpit, someone says, "She flies like Z Alpha." But those who really know the story, they say something else. "She flies because Z Alpha did it first."